And thank you for joining Autism Nova Scotia and Halifax and Regional MFRC to talk about survival mode, how to cope, strategies, and where to turn. Your presenters today is myself, Jenny Tyler, Community Outreach, Events and Membership Coordinator with Autism Nova Scotia. One of the things about me that may be interesting is that I do actually have a child on the spectrum myself. He's almost 16 now. And as you can tell by my accent, I moved from the UK to Nova Scotia almost 13 years ago now with my family. And presenting with me, I'd like to hand over to my colleague.
Hi, I'm Melissa Clark. I am the Special Needs and Inclusion Navigator for the Halifax and Region Military Family Resource Center. I've been with the organization in some capacity or another for almost 10 years. So I work a lot with families in different capacities, and like it says on the screen, I'm passionate about helping our families, and one of my self-care is I enjoy knitting.
And I still haven't had a scarf or anything. Wow.
I have a box, so we may have to bring it and you can look through it.
Okay. So what does survival mode look like? Well, survival mode looks different to everybody. You can see by the chart here that there are physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, cognitive symptoms, and social symptoms. I know when I am starting to look starting to get into my survival mode, I have headaches, I get really tight muscles, I start to have intense negative feelings, I feel like I'm not in control, I'm becoming flexible as well, and then I start to withdraw from my friends. So that's what it looks like for me. It looks different for everybody. Melissa, how do you look when you go into survival mode?
When I start to go in, I tend to clean, and I don't just not a swipe, like I go into intense cleaning mode. It's just a way for me to get some of that physical stuff out of my body, but it also lets me, my brain work too.
Yeah.
So sometimes that helps, but I find I do withdraw socially. I get irritable, as my daughter can attest to. And I get a lot of those.
Yeah, and it looks different for everybody, and it looks different depending on what you're coping with in that moment as well.
Yeah, absolutely, especially with it not feeling in control. Cleaning does that for me because I'm in control.
Wow, I should try that one. Okay, so what are some of the things that can lead for you to be in survival mode? We've got multiple appointments with multiple doctors, clinicians, office visits, home visits. Sometimes there's no family here to call on for assistance. You find you're the keeper of information, schedules, routines, strategies. Everything happens all at once. You put everyone and everything else first. And you can see from the pictures here, this is sometimes how I feel for my day-to-day. I feel like I've got to remember to call the doctor to book an appointment in. I always feel like the white rabbit. I'm always running behind. My family are by far the first thing in my thoughts and the last thing in my thoughts at night. And then the person in the far right corner, that's me. That's how I feel all the time. It's a bit like having many Google tabs open too many tabs open at once. And this is what it's supposed to be. Survival mode is supposed to be a phase that helps save your life. It's not meant to be how you live your life. Easier said than done. Survival mode was in us because way back when, we'd need to have that fight or flight mode. So if there was danger, we'd flee. And now with our lives today, everything is 24/7. We have very stressful lives. We have loved ones who have autism and multiple needs that really, really put us into this survival mode, because we're not just thinking and looking after ourselves, we're thinking, advocating, and living sometimes for our loved ones with diverse needs. Melissa, is there anything you'd like to say on this one?
I think you just nailed it, Jenny. Like, you know, it's sometimes we don't even realize you're in it because that's where you live all the time.
Very much so. Okay, so who here looks after someone with autism? When we did this live, we had many hands showing. We all make sure that they are dressed for the weather. We check that they've eaten, taken their meds. We found that we are looking after our loved one's self-care, mainly because they may not be able to fully do it themselves. So we're looking after someone else's care and well-being, but we're not always looking after our own self-care. Okay, my favorite. So because superpowers do not exist, you can only go so long before your mind and body says enough. People who care can tell you to look after yourself, but only you can do it. I want you to close your eyes. Imagine that you're sitting on a cloud watching your family from a distance, doing day-to-day things. But you can't speak to them, you can't touch them, you can only observe. And I bet at first you get that warm glow of, wow, that's my family down there and I love them. But then as you watch the scene below, it gets messy because you can see that a meltdown is about to happen, but your partner is not paying attention. One thing leads to another and more things go awry. How are you feeling now? Anxious? Cross? You knew that if you were down there in that room, things would be different. Now open your eyes. You can do things differently, but we have to learn to trust those around us. They're not going to do things exactly the way that you would do them, but that's okay. No one can be who we are. No one can give what we give, but they're trying their best. And they can take guidance, and you can help with some tips and leaving notes. But at the end of the day, for you to have self-care, you have to learn to delegate and trust those around us.
We are not alone. It takes a village. You can't pour from an empty cup. That's very similar to the explanation on the airplanes, right, of the mask. You have to put yours on before you can help somebody else with theirs.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so hard to do.
It's very hard to do.
This is one of my favorite slides, and this is something that I have up in around my desk area. So I can't tell you the number of times my husband or my daughter looks at me and says, "Are you okay?" And often my reply is, "Yep, I'm fine." But really this message shows why I'm fine. I'm not fine in the real sense of the word, but it's easier than telling them what is happening in my body and mind. So yes, I'm fine. I'm freaked out. I'm insecure. I'm nervous. I'm emotional, but I'm fine. Does this sound familiar? Can any of you relate possibly? Melissa, do you have any insight?
Yeah, I think this belongs on everybody's fridge. Like, you know, and we do like, I think everybody goes through this where just as caregivers, like, you know, we always feel like we have to say we're fine. Because if we are not fine, then how is everybody else, like everybody else is going to fall apart,
Yeah.
Which is down that slippery slope. So it's just, it speaks to me in so many different ways.
Melissa, I'm really glad that you said this belongs on everybody's fridge, meaning every human being's fridge can understand this. Because I think sometimes when I am feeling fine personally, when I'm freaked out, insecure, nervous, and emotional, I think I am the only one who has ever felt like this in the world. But really, if I thought about it, there's so many people out there that understand this. Almost every human being would understand this, and they would be more than happy if I reached out.
And also just remember, if you have something like this where everyone in your family can see it, and they know that you're actually not fine in the real sense of the word, if they look at this, they're going to realize that you're nervous, you're emotional, you're insecure, you're freaked out. and they may be able to do something to support you, or it may just give them that kind of emotional shake to think, okay, that's not fine, that's fine. And maybe bring you a coffee, or just give you a hug or something, or just give you the space that maybe you may need. Everyone's different.
Yeah, and I think it gives families the opportunity to help, because they always want to. But as caregivers, like we've said before, is when we were sitting on the cloud, sometimes it's just easier if we do it, and it causes less stress. But in reality, what it does is just fills your cup with stress instead of everything else that we need. So I think as caregivers, we really have to be open to say, yes, you can help.
Yeah.
And what I like about the rest of this workshop that we're going to be doing is that there's a number of visuals that you're sharing, Jenny. And if you can put some of these visuals on your mirror or on your front door before you leave, just to remind yourself that you're not alone, that, you know, these are true feelings, and that there's so many people out there that would get this.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
So what is self-care? Self-care is essentially taking time and paying attention to you. It's doing any activity that you do to look after your mental, physical, and emotional health. It's effectively meeting your body's needs. Melissa, would you mind reading what the Google definition is, please?
The practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health, the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress, and expressing oneself as an essential form of self-care.
Thank you. Now, where I said that it's taking time out to look after your mental, physical, and emotional health, you don't have to hit all of those with in one shot. It could just be sitting down and having a coffee. That's looking after your mental and possibly your physical health. They don't have to be big, grand self-care things that you do, going away on vacation, having a long hot bath. Sometimes that's just not practical, but finding time at the end when everyone is in bed and calm, and actually taking time to sit and have a hot drink and just reflect or breathe is self-care too. But it's going to look different for everyone, the same as autism is different for everyone. Self-care looks different for each of us. For me, it's meeting friends for coffee. Melissa, your self-care is
some of it is knitting, and other times it's just same as you. I just like to just sit in my chair and have a coffee and watch some mindless TV.
Oh yes, Grey's Anatomy for me. So that's what self-care is, but what can you do to help? Well, our pictures here show that you can ask for help, but everyone needs strategies and a place to start. And again, it's going to look different for you. Some of the things we've already discussed is I go out for coffee with friends, Melissa knits. So there are different things.
And I walk with my fur babies.
And you walk with your fur babies. I did that just before I jumped on this call. So yeah, it made me feel good being outside. The sun's actually shining today, and he was taking his own sweet time on every street corner, and it was actually really nice. So for the next slide, I'm handing over to Melissa.
So one of the things that MFRC always talks about, and we do it in a variety of different ways, is the mental health continuum and what it can look like. And it's a really great visual. I'm not going to go through everything on here, but it's a really great way to look at and try and be more aware of your mental health and when you're actually getting into some trouble. So when we're healthy, your mental health is healthy, like, you know, you've got a good sense of humor, things are going good, you feel good, you're sleeping, you're doing all those things that you enjoy, you're just, everything's cool, like everything's good. You have your support system in place. And then when we're starting to go into the yellow, where we start reacting, where we start saying like, oh, you're a little bit more nervous. All those negative feelings are starting to come a little bit more often. You don't want to go anywhere. You just want to, like, you know, you're taking time to, like, you know, you're just not doing what you typically would do. And one of those things is we really like to help people look for is to recognize those limits and to start using those coping skills, like getting enough rest, eating, which people think is a bad thing, but actually you need that. You need the fuel. Exercising if that's a thing for you. Reducing the barriers, and start asking for help in the yellow, which there's lots of different ways to ask for help. When we look at going into the orange, which is where you're into the injured part, is where we're seeing a lot of anxiety. You're seeing more anger. You're seeing more sadness, hopelessness. Things just, like, you know, your body hurts. Even though you're not physically hurt, you still feel incredible fatigue and aches and pains, and you're not sleeping. You're avoiding, you're withdrawing from your friends and social networks. You're not talking to peers. That's when you really need to hopefully have someone who can say, like, look beyond the fine and say, you're really not fine. What can I do to help? And ask for help, and just understanding that we love to have people come ask us for help. That's what we're here for. And it's not that we're going to fix it for you, but we can certainly help you work on the tools to help yourself. So looking for those signs of distress. And it's always good to maintain that social contact. When somebody goes into the ill, so when they're going into the red, is really when they need professional assistance. They need, there's a couple of options, of course. You can always come through us for our mental health and well-being team. But there's also the IWK for children, and also the QE2 has their mental health teams as well. 911 if it's that point.
Strongest Families.
Strongest Families, which would be a great place to start if you're going into the yellow, to try and head yourself off from hitting the red. But Strongest Families is absolutely a great place to start. And again, you can certainly access those to the mental health and well-being team as well. And it's really working on getting you back to the green again. It is so important because we all have so many, as caregivers, have so many people relying on us, especially living the military lifestyle, the added stress of whether your partner is deployed, or that even funner one where they're in and out all the time, and dealing with disruptions in your routines, because of course they come home and they want to be a part of everything, but that throws everything off. And then throw children who have needs on top of that, or you have an elderly family member who's living with you. The stress can just compound itself so fast. And what we really like to do with this slide is just to have people recognize what these things can look like, so you can try and catch it before it goes too far.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for explaining that, Melissa.
Yeah, it's a really great tool. So, SMART goals, setting SMART goals. What is the goal that you could set today? It can be simple, as in, I'm going to get dressed, or I'm going to walk outside for 10 minutes. Really small goals that you can really carry through with. So today, after this, I said, I'm going to have a coffee with my friend, and this morning I woke up and I felt this overwhelming, no, I've got too much to do, it's a holiday tomorrow, I need to do this, this, and this, and I haven't done this, and I haven't spent time doing this, and I was really starting to get myself heightened. And then I took a deep breath and realized that I'm actually going to do those things so much better if I take the half an hour I was going to do with my friend. So it's setting that goal. That was what I'd had in my head, and I actually wrote it down in my diary. It's there. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go and have a really great decadent coffee after I finish sharing self-care tips with you guys. one of my other favorite slides. I have lots of favorite slides. Think it, ink it, and do it. So you just heard me say that I was having the wobbles about going for my coffee date today, and then I wrote it in my calendar. So if you think it and then you ink it, you are more likely to do it. Schedule time for you. It doesn't have to be long stretches of time, but if you don't schedule it in, you're more unlikely to do it. And above all, your family won't see you doing it. Encourage your partner to schedule time in too. Model self-care to your family as a whole. I'm sure most of you, if you get an appointment for a doctor or dentist, you write it straight on the family calendar. Everyone knows you're going, and if you don't go, someone generally would notice. Self-care is no different, and maybe if you start off by scheduling it in once a week, it's going to become habit, and then maybe you'll extend that self-care. But if you have, like me, an older daughter, she started to see that we were doing it, and she does it now. She's in university. She makes sure that she looks after herself as well, especially during exam times. And the best thing is, as you know, I have an autistic son, and he actually sees it on the calendar. If I'm home, when it says that I'm supposed to be somewhere else on my calendar, he questions me. He points to the calendar and brings it to my face and wonders why I'm here. So it's modeling great behavior. So think it, ink it, and do it.
Love this visual.
Very busy. It's like my head, very busy. But you don't have to do, so there are 10 ideas on here, and you don't have to do them all, but just do one of them. So plan ahead, like I say, planning ahead for your coffee date, or planning ahead to go to the library and having half an hour there in the quiet. Remember to take one day at a time. Try and accept help. Get enough rest and eat properly. Most of us, I'm sure, skip meals. That's not great for us. Be good to yourself. Remember, remind yourself, you're doing great. Learn about the available resources. If you get to a stage where you realize you can't do everything on your own, what's there to help you? Developing contingency plans, because we're all superheroes, but we don't always manage to do it all. So what can be a contingency plan? Number 6 is hard, making your health a priority. But I've learned from experience that your body will shut down when it's had enough. If you're not listening to the cues, your body and your brain will shut down, and you've got to make your health a priority. As Margaret said on the beginning, if you're on a plane and they do the safety video, you have to take the oxygen mask before you help anyone else. If you're not looking after your health, it's going to have an impact on the whole family. So you've got to make yourself a priority. Making time for leisure and sharing your feelings with others. And that doesn't mean having a huge heart-to-heart unless you want to. But like we said earlier, putting the I'm fine visual up on the fridge or the calendar where everyone can see it, that's sharing your feelings. If you say, I'm fine, in a certain way, they're going to know why you're fine. So the self-care wheel, this is a really, really good thing that you can look at. Before I really started going down the self-care route for myself and my family, I found it very hard to know what self-care looked like or what I could be doing for myself. So this was a really great tool, and it looked at many things in my life. So I do work full-time. So it was nice to have the professional part there, and sometimes it is taking a full lunch break. For me, I feel that I sometimes have to run at a drop of the hat. Last week, my son had quite a violent meltdown, and I had to just drop everything and leave. And because I'm in that fight or flight mode with that, I always feel that if I work through my lunch breaks, my co-workers will see that I'm working hard, so when I do have to leave, that's not looking after myself. So now I make sure I do take time for lunch. My personal, I made a vision board. I go for coffee with friends. So that's something that I do for me. Spiritual, for me, it's going outside, going to the ocean, and just going for a walk with the dog. Like this morning, that was so nice to see the sun and the birds. Emotionally, I find this one very, very hard, but we like to watch a family movie together. That, for me, is emotional. My family are all together, and we've managed to find one movie that we're all happy with. Psychological, again, is something that I find very hard, but we use essential oils in our family. I love to just sit in the sun and have the sun on my face. So for me, that's what works for me. And physically, I do have to have regular medical care, and I do make sure that I have my chiropractic and massage and go for walks and things like that. So that's me. But the thing is, if you can look at this wheel and just choose one thing from each section, you're starting your journey of self-care. Melissa, do you have anything to add on this slide?
I think the big thing, and it says in the middle there, is life balance. Balance is so hard when you have so many things coming at you from different ways, whether it's work, your children, your partner, the home. Like, everybody has so many things going on in their lives. And like you said, I think it was so great. If you could pick one thing for each one of those areas, then you're really going to see that life balance, and you really see how it can really be so positive on your life.
Very much so. It's a great visual.
One thing I like about picking one thing as well when you're speaking about the SMART goals is one thing on each of those tabs is doable, it's manageable. So it's something that we can actually accomplish.
Exactly. And you know, honestly, Margaret, when I first looked at this, and say we came to spiritual, or I came to spiritual, as soon as I saw that, I actually skipped over it because I thought, I don't go to church every week. This is not for me. But when I looked and read it, I'm like, okay, spiritual means many other things. And I was able to find something. So I encourage you to really read what's on there, because it really surprised me, and it gave me the tools to, and just as we've done here, highlight one thing. It's the think it, ink it, do it, and the setting your SMART goals.
And if anybody is interested, we're going to have the contact information of how you can access Melissa and Jenny at the end of the session and get any of these resources.
Okay, so how many of you have had one of these on your fridge when you had your first child and you left them with someone for the first time? How many of you have a plan for your family should something happen? You know, I remember the first time I left my eldest child alone when we arrived here in Canada. We had no family close by, very few friends, and I left every tiny detail on the fridge for that babysitter, including what blood type my daughter was. If I'm honest, I also still do the same for when we have respite for my son, except it's hidden in a cupboard because he doesn't like to see it. I don't have a family plan as such written down, but with all my health issues, there are many times I end up in hospital and I need my support teams. And from early on, my children know who to call if anything happens. They know who can collect them from school, who's allowed to drive them, and whose car they're not allowed to get into. It's not written down, but we have a plan. Every time something happens, we go through the plan. Having a plan in place helps your peace of mind, and it helps your family members know what can be put into place when you're not around. And then I'm going to hand over to Melissa to talk about the military member's responsibility.
Yeah, so as you can see, it's a little hard to read there because, of course, it's a government form. But what it says, I know, right? But what this is so the military member needs to fill these out, and it's required, and it's kept with their unit. And it has information as to who their family is. Family means different things to different people. So it could be your family is your Uncle Joe. It could be your cousin Jenny. It's really having all that information. military members, like it's saying on the thing, are obligated to fill out this form and have it with their unit. But along with that is also having this great one that says babysitter plan, or a version of it for at home, so that if your member is away and you do have somebody coming in for respite or something happens and you're calling us, then we actually have that already. So having, like, you know, the types of medications your child or your people are on, the people of concern, certain ways you do things, so bedtimes and sleep routines, and this has to happen first before this happens. All those kinds of things that you do without even thinking about it is such a great thing to have on hand when, if for some reason, another care provider who doesn't know your family has to come in. So that's one of the other things, especially as we all know, when a member is deployed. You know, that's when everything happens. It never happens. So I've been down that road too. Like, you know, I had a roof go while my partner was deployed. So figuring out how to handle all that was incredibly stressful. So that's one thing that you can do to help yourself too, so that, you know, I don't have to try and think of everything on the spot in the middle of a crisis, so that my child, who may be on the spectrum, is not going to have meltdowns as well.
And the other thing, with autism, we have many visuals. We always talk about visuals, having schedules. And as our children get older, because autism is a lifelong disability, as our children get older, as families, we tend to think, well, you know, they don't need pictures anymore. You know, they can read, or they know the routine. But we know with autism, when something happens, that routine, whether they know it inside out and upside down, goes out of their head when they're in a stressful situation. So it's always good to have those visual keys, whether it's in the form of a checklist or visuals, pictures, not only for the individuals, but when you do have to have someone coming in to help, they can follow the same routine that you do day in, day out, because it's all up in the house. It's there. So keep those visuals. They're there for a reason, and they're really helpful. And I think as our children do come into, I mean, we're going through this now. My son is coming up for 16, and he doesn't want to see the visuals, because if anyone comes round, it makes him look different in his words. But he really does need them when he's in times of stress. So we have them in cupboards and things, so we can just go and we'll open the cupboard and it's there. So have them and make it work for your family.
I really like the idea as well that when you sit down and write these kind of plans, whether it's the military plan or the babysitting plan, when it's calm, then you can really think of all the details, and then you can explain it to your family, maybe in a family meeting. This is the steps we're going to take, and then it becomes almost automatic if there is an emergency. You go to your cupboards, you pick up the list, and you say, okay, this is what we're doing now. And it just makes sense. It makes so much calmer, I think, in times of stress when you have a plan. I love this idea.
And it doesn't have to be called a babysitter plan. You can call it family plan. You can call it what you like, that's going to be comfortable for everyone. But do one. That's the main thing. Have one so that everyone knows.
Yeah. Call it what you like, but have one.
Exactly.
And sometimes you may need plan B and C.
Yes, and D and E.
Yeah. And that's okay. And that's talk about being prepared.
Exactly. Okay, so what strategies have worked for you in the past? So, as we just said, have plan B, C, D, and E, because things will happen. Then use strategy F. Strategies that have worked for me is actually having that buddy system. So building my circle of friends and them knowing what each of their role is in an emergency. I do have health issues, and I do end up in emergency quite frequently. And now there's that plan in place, and each one, it's like a domino effect. So they know who to connect with between themselves, and that's taken me out of the equation. Melissa, do you have any strategies that have worked for you in the past, or some families have used?
I think a lot of them would be getting together as groups. So we do coffee connections at our MFRC. We also have Café Français. So really trying to get those families together to support each other. They're living a similar life. And then we, of course, we do share and support for families with needs as well, just to add that extra layer of not only are the military lifestyle, but we also have family members with special or complex needs. So making sure we really try to help them build that connection and build that support group of their own, especially for those families who have no family here. We have quite a few. We have so many families who just have nobody else. They have no family to count on.
Yeah. And
I have another question. What about strategies for school? How do you work with the school administration team to help your child succeed?
Just the same as you have, as we've discussed with the family, having a plan, coming together and working together, and being clear and open about your asks. And if that's not working, then going to either the MFRC or coming to a group like Autism Nova Scotia, where there are people there to help you advocate. And Autism Nova Scotia currently have 9 chapters around Nova Scotia, and each of those have someone in there that can offer support for families. There are support groups around the province as well for families living with autism. But it really is, it's about knowing what you're asking for. Also as well, I think one of the things that I've taken away over my years going into the school meetings is being able to compromise. You may have a list of 10 things, you may only get 2 of them, but the compromise is that those 2 are done really, really well, and then the next term you could build in more of those supports. So it's having the ability to be able to compromise as well. And I think those are things that I know of that are my go-to ones, I think, for families.
So researching specific groups for different needs.
Yeah.
Being able to compromise, put your visuals on the fridge to remind ourselves to look after ourselves.
Yeah.
So that we can care for others.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this is a tough one.
Yeah.
These ladies that I work with, I adore them and I love working with them, but they do make things difficult for me. So I find this slide really, really difficult. For me, I'm my son's advocate. I'm his voice sometimes. I am the person in the family that gets everyone where they are and where they need to be. And just reading this really brings me a lot of anxiety. But that actually probably means that I need to start stepping up my self-care. So giving yourself permission to ask for help. So just having this on your fridge again or in your diary and saying, I, Jenny, give myself permission to ask for help because I don't know it all and I can't do it all. Those are such hard words for someone who is in control of many people's lives. We find it very tough to ask for help. Melissa, do you find this easy?
Not at all. I am a complete, I'm a single parent, so my life is all about control to make sure my daughter is well taken care of and that she gets to where she needs to be and taking care of everything else that goes along with being a parent and working full-time and everything else. And for my own sanity, I have to keep control over everything. I have to have my hand on everything just for my own self-care, which is troubling, and this makes me hard too to say that I don't know it all and I can't do it all. That one's really hard, that I can't do it all.
Yeah. I actually had a bit of a wobble at work last week, I think, And my coworker actually put a sticky note on my computer and told me it has to stay there, and it actually says, you can't do it all and you are not alone. And that's really powerful. I try to do it all, doesn't work.
Great coworkers are so important.
Very much so, especially when you are living with children who have diverse needs, and as I say, you're just waiting for a call or an email to come from the school or work or wherever they are to say that something's happening. So who else can help? You've got family doctors, friends and family, support groups. We've already talked about Autism Nova Scotia, or if you're not from Nova Scotia, a local autism team. Your local MFRCs are great supports. The Strongest Family Institute is a really great team of people. And we also have this great website that you can visit and get lots of resources and things like that. So what was your aha moment today? So I just want you to take a moment to kind of think back on all those slides and think about what you can take away from today, because you're not going to be able to do it all. You're not going to be able to do everything we've said, but what one thing can you take away and you go, aha, I can do that. It's going to help me.
The first one that comes to mind is we all need to ask for help at some time in our life.
Yeah.
We are not alone.
We're not, and who can you hold yourself accountable to? So I wouldn't know, I've never done this, but if you go running, say, and train for a marathon, you generally would have a running buddy who keeps you accountable for going to the gym and running set times and things like that. And just like that, who can you have who holds you accountable? So my friend and I have a really good system that if I haven't heard from her in a couple of days, I'll turn up on her doorstep or she turns up on mine, because we know that they're in that hiding place. We don't want to come out. We don't want to talk to anyone. And so we have that system in place. And it's really kind of, who are you going to hold? Who's going to help you be accountable for looking after yourself?
I think that's so important. Like, you know, if we can have that one person who's not afraid to speak up. And I think it's, as women, as caregivers, we're always afraid that we're going to hurt somebody and make them hear something that they don't want to hear. But having that one person who can do that is so incredibly valuable.
Yeah, very much so.
What I find is really interesting too is one of the people that wrote here is we are not alone. And as human beings, we really have to remember that. And the font that came for the first time, we are not alone, it was super tiny. So I just made it really big, because we have to remember that our community is there for us. They need us to ask for help, because that's what community does. Community wants to help. They just don't know how sometimes. So, you know, please think of that, if anything, from this session. We are not alone.
Yeah, and people want to help, but they're not going to help if they don't know what they can help with. So where can you go? And just to kind of tie up the last end, so you can reach out to myself, and my email is there, jtyler@autismns.ca. You can also reach out to Melissa, who is our Special Needs and Inclusion Navigator, melissa.clark@forces.gc.ca. I want you to remember that you are amazing. I'd love for you to join social media and share your experience of today's session. Join Autism Nova Scotia as a member. Connect with H&R MFRC at any time. Join the Military Family Services Facebook page, Children with Special Needs. check out the Strongest Families Institute. They have some really great online programs as well as good support. Remembering that you are not alone. And most importantly, breathe. Breathe and take a moment for you. And thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. Thank you to Melissa for being a partner with me and making this happen. And of course, our wonderful Margaret, who is doing this remotely for us and is a great inspirational leader for us.
Thank you. For any of the resources, please connect with Jay Tyler at autism.ns.ca or Melissa Clark, melissa.clark@forces.gc.ca. We'd gladly send you any of the resources from this recording. Thank you so much for joining, and please share it as you see fit. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.